You're watching KMNH, Kids Making the News Happen.
Hi, I'm Larkin. It's Friday, June 19th, and you're watching KMNH, Kids Making the News Happen.
Last week, Jenny Jenkins was interviewed on It's Our Time. Jenny spoke about how we can serve other people by being curious and learning more about a person and their situation. Then we can build a relationship that leads to possible change. Robert English also posted up a quote that leads to a discussion amongst our Happen teens. We invited Robert to the KMNH studio to talk more about why he posted that quote and to learn more about his community involvement. Then, we sent him some questions and invited him on today's It's Our Time segment. Thank you for being on KMNH.
It's an honor to be with you today. I am a big fan of KMNH.
What is your occupation?
I am a pastor in the United Methodist Church, which means that I am a spiritual leader and a community organizer. And I am currently serving at Clifton United Methodist Church. But here's something that's really exciting. This summer, we are starting a new progressive, inclusive spiritual community here in Northside, and I have the honor and the privilege of doing that work alongside our congregation at Clifton.
How did the quote have an impact on your life?
So when I was growing up, being part of community service projects was a big part of my life. I was involved in Boy Scouts, I was involved in school service projects, and I was involved in a church youth group where we did different community-centered service projects all the time throughout the year. And then I started my work and I started to organize some of those community service projects on behalf of the congregation that I was serving. It was a couple years in when I started to read about these radical priests in South America, including a man named Gustavo Gutierrez, who was encouraging and actually challenging me and others to not just do good work in the world, but to also cultivate strong, faithful relationships with people who are poor, with people who are suffering injustice, for people who are oppressed in any way, so that we could not just do some good work, but we could learn their story, we could learn their name, and we believe that that love, that relationship, can actually lead to greater transformation, not just in the neighborhood and in the world, but also within our hearts and within our lives. So that quote continues to challenge me in how I try and live in this world to make sure that I'm cultivating friendships with people who are different than me, people who look different than I do, people who vote different than I do, people who have a different socioeconomic circumstance than I have, and that those relationships help for mutual transformation.
Why do you think names are so important?
I think that names are so important and fundamental because a name is a unique thing that honors what I call the inherent sacred worth or the sacred value of all people. So we all have a name, even if our name is common or ubiquitous, and lots of people are called Robert in the world, but my name is Robert Days English, and that reflects my uniqueness in this world. And so if I'm able to learn someone's name, and then when I see them around our neighborhood, to be able to call them by name, I think in a small way, it honors that they are beautiful, that they are valued, and that they are loved just the way that they are, just however they are. I know in my life, when someone is able to remember my name or knows something about my story, even if we just met briefly, that gives me a tremendous sense of connection, and it reminds me that our lives are intertwined with one another, not just because we live in the same neighborhood, but because we're part of this big and beautiful and diverse human community. So I think it's really important, and it's hard to do. It's hard to remember someone's name sometimes, and it takes a little bit of work, but I found that work, that effort has been so helpful in my life in helping me to build really, really interesting and wonderful and challenging relationships with lots of different types of folks.
Who or what influenced you when you were young to do what you are doing today?
Well, I had a couple influences. I was really, really involved in my church when I was growing up, and I had a strong and loving, supportive community, which helped me to understand and to grow into who I am today. But I wanted to say specifically that I had a wonderful mentor named Stephen Govette, who is also a pastor in the Methodist Church. And Stephen challenged me to think about what ways my faith, my beliefs, can make a difference in this world. He taught me something called the social gospel, which basically means that as someone who is a Christian, that I have an ethical obligation to work for justice in this world, not just to try and get into heaven. One of the things that was most impactful when I was young is he asked me and a small group of us, he said, if you didn't believe that heaven was real, would you still want to live a Jesus ethic? And that was a really hard question because I grew up believing that I was doing this to try and get into heaven. But he challenged me and others to think about how loving our neighbor as much as we love ourselves would change how we lived in this world and changed how we worked for social justice and social transformation in our neighborhood.
You said little changes from the heart can make big changes in the world. Can you explain and expand on that saying?
So one of the great things in my work is that I get to walk alongside people for an entire season of their life. And I worked a lot with young people, and so I want to share just a short story. I had a young woman who was part of our youth group when she was a teenager, and she was participating in some of these service projects and these different missional activities in the community. And we as a group, as a community, were talking about building strong, loving relationships with people who are different than us, and about how that leads us to work for transformation in this world. Well, those experiences have impacted her as a young person so much that now as she's graduating from college, she is going to be working at a nonprofit where she will be spending part of her year over in Nepal, living and working in an orphanage, and then the other part of her year here in the United States, helping to raise money to support the orphanage. So I think that those little changes that she experienced as a young person are now making this world of difference in her life and through her life in this world. I think that when we really commit to trying to learn someone's name, then it leads us to change the way that we live in our neighborhood. It's a little bit like Happen. So Happen's vision or Happen's mission is to remind us that community isn't just where you live, but it's how we live together. If we commit to learning each other's names, to hearing each other's stories, especially those folks who don't think like us, look like us, act like us, come from the same cultural location or the same socioeconomic circumstance, then I believe it will make our neighborhood a better place overall. I believe that it can transform our neighborhood into what our neighborhood could and should be.
Why did you decide to live and raise a family in Northside?
So my family moved here just 2 years ago from out of state, from Southern California, and we moved to Northside and we bought a house without ever having seen it in person. And my wife and I, Allison and I, did some research, and we wanted to raise our kids and our family. We wanted to live in a neighborhood that was walkable, a neighborhood that was progressive and inclusive, and a neighborhood that was or is diverse. And we feel like Northside checked off all of those boxes, but we also, when we got here, we came to realize that Northside is the most weird and wonderful place that we, or at least I, have ever lived. This is the most strange neighborhood that I've ever lived in. And it's this weird, eclectic group of people in this really strange, diverse landscape. And I could not have imagined a better place to raise my daughters. A better place for them to understand and to know and to grow in this diverse and wondrous world.
Thank you for all that you are doing in Northside and for your support at Happen Inc. and KMNH.
We are big fans of KMNH. We are so proud and inspired by all that you all are doing. Thank you. Thank you on behalf of my family and on behalf of our neighborhood for being leaders and for having such a strong voice during this time. And thanks for having me on.
We also had a chance to report on Stronger Together, a platform for young adults to have their voices heard. The online Zoom summit featured Cincinnati Police Chief Elliot Isaacs, Van Rucker, Cincinnati Police Sergeant Mitchell, Sean Jeffers, and teen leaders like Serena Wynn and Miona. It was 2 hours of constructive questions, answers, and performers. Chief Isaacs said that he has children, even though they're older now, that when he sees kids' faces, he sees his own kids' faces, and is concerned about the kids he sees as much as he is concerned about his own children. Sergeant Mitchell said that everyone deserves the right to be treated freely and emphasized that there has to be respect given to the public and to the police. Attorney Fannin Rucker, who was asked how we can keep juveniles from entering the justice system, said 3 things must happen. First, we need to engage and build relationships. Does that sound familiar? 2, we need to make sure that our young people are given the right information. And 3, we need to educate young people on the consequences of their actions in hopes that it will keep them from getting into trouble. Mr. Rucker also pointed out that he was once a judge and that he would never just put out a blanket type sentence for an offense. He said that a sentence should be given in consideration of a person's circumstances and what influenced them to commit a possible crime. Basically, everyone from Jenny Jenkins to Gustavo Gutierrez to Robert English to Police Chief of Cincinnati is saying that we need to build relationships. When Chief Isaac was asked, "Where do we go from here?" he responded by encouraging everyone to continue to build relationships, to listen and to engage. He also said that he sees a great revolution in the future of police enforcement.
Hi, I'm Tulip and this is today's KMNH Weather Report. Today is partly cloudy with a high of 88 and a low of 65. On Saturday, it will be in the 90s. Then on Sunday, which is Father's Day, we will have scattered thunderstorms. I hope everyone has a great Father's Day weekend. This is Tulip with your weather report.
Thanks for tuning in to KMNH, Kids Making the News Happen. KMNH is brought to you by Happen Inc. and is filmed in the Happen Studio in Northside on the corner of Chase and Hamilton. I'm Omer. I hope that you've enjoyed this broadcast, and I hope that you will tune in again tomorrow for more Kids Making the News Happen.